Question. Okay. Yeah, my okay. Yeah, my okay. You can sign it for me twice.
Thank you. No, excuse me, sir. How are you? Don't worry, I'm just changing it so
You put your timer on. You think you can go the whole hour?
Never figured for one.
Good evening, everyone. This is the Committee of the Whole meeting, September 11, 2017. Our city clerk, Susanna Herman, is not with us this evening. In her stead is Deputy City Clerk Ruth Scott. I'd ask Ruth for a roll call, please.
Jacobson,
Here.
Fanouken,
Here.
Markwart,
Here.
Fagan,
Here.
Noriko,
Here.
Verbic,
Here.
Favor,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
8 present.
We have one consideration on the Committee of the Whole meeting tonight, and that's our Police Department Annual Award Ceremony. I'd like to welcome to the podium our Police Chief, Gene Lowry.
I wasn't quite expecting that, but thank you very much. Thanks to the City Council, City staff, and to the community, first and foremost. This is our 4th time we've done our annual awards presentation, and it's a tradition we hope that carries on for years to come. Just a few brief comments before we begin. Today, nationwide, we honor the sacrifices and give honor the sacrifices given and the honor of those who served to those who were either injured or died as a result of the terrorist attacks in the United States on September 11, 2001. Today is also the day we honor the men and women of the DeKalb Police Department who serve our community each day, knowing that the challenges they face and not necessarily knowing what the outcome that those challenges would be. This is our annual award ceremony and acknowledges some of these challenges. Yet there are officers and staff who've done amazing things that aren't here tonight and aren't being acknowledged. Yet, though these don't cover everything, I want to say to all the men and women of the DeKalb Police Department, thank you for the job you do, day in and day out. Thank you for how you do it in such a professional and exemplary manner. And thank you for having the courage to do it. With that, could we please pipe in those to be honored? We can go ahead and move to dismiss, and we'll bring you back around. Chief Hicks, thank you very much for providing us with a piper tonight. It certainly adds the tradition that we all seek to honor the men and women of the DeKalb Police Department. As we're preparing to line up for the ceremony, I would just once again add, this is like every other day that these men and women do their job. And today is all about acknowledging what they do in their job. So during the course of reading the citations for these honorees, try to pay special attention to what's the content of those narratives and how you might feel if you were placed in a situation where you had to face the same challenges. And I sincerely mean it when I say it's so very, very important for us to acknowledge what they do day in and day out and thank them and acknowledge them for their service. The first group we're going to honor are the honorable recognitions. And these fall into a category that I usually refer to as act of kindness. It's not that all acts of kindness should come to a ceremony of this nature, but some should. And it's also incumbent upon us as police officers and leaders to acknowledge that inasmuch as bravery, courage, making the right decision in a tough tactical situation are very important and need to be acknowledged, so do those simple acts of kindness that our officers display to the community. May we please have police officers Jordan Poulos, Keontae Mallett, John Lickle, Stephen Parsons, Jonathan Jerzyk, Sadie Perstavi, Charles Verdoni, Allison Remness, Joseph Gordon, Aaron Gates, and Sergeant Paul Mott. Though there's a few that aren't available tonight due to other considerations, those that are here represent the finest of our police department. On December 25th, 2016, and that gives me a slight reminder at the very beginning of this, these awards acknowledge efforts from September to September. So September of 2016 till September of this year. We always like to have this ceremony on or as close to September 11th as we can because it's quite fitting to honor those who serve. On December 25th, 2016, officers responded to a domestic dispute that included a mother with 3 children. The mother and 3 children were staying with a family member so they can enjoy the Christmas holiday. However, during their stay, a domestic dispute broke out between family members, and when officers arrived on scene, they found children crying. They had to quell a disturbance and arrange shelter for the children and the mother with safe passage. Now, these officers knew that there would be no Christmas for those children. Those children were pretty acutely aware of it as well. So they collected their own money. Let me say that again. They collected their own money, purchased and wrapped gifts for each child, did so shopping at a local all-night drugstore. Wrapped those gifts for each child. The staff members from Safe Passage agreed to be Santa Claus that night and place those gifts by the children's bed so they would have them the next morning. The officers' compassion for this family, by doing this simple act of kindness, going above and beyond, were exemplary. They represented themselves in this police department in an honorable manner, and they are to be honorably recognized. Thank you. As these officers prepare to leave the room at this time, I want you to know that police departments from all over the country sent acknowledgments to our department praising their efforts. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. 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 Thank you.
May I have Police Officer Jeffrey Winters. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about this, although this was well covered by our local newspaper. On June 14, 2017, Officer Jeffrey Winters was on routine patrol on the north side of our community when he encountered a homeless man who was in transit with no food or resources. Officer Winters bought the individual a meal and also purchased him a duffel bag with some essentials to make his journey a little more comfortable. His actions were witnessed by a community member who reported it on Facebook, acknowledging what Officer Winters had been doing. The reporting party stated, "My heart is so full and happy to see this. And when Officer Winters was asked about the incident, he stated the following: "God gave me the resources to provide for myself and my family, and it's my obligation to help those in need if I can." This simple act of kindness, the simple act of compassion for a less fortunate human being, was another act above and beyond, was exemplary, represented himself and the DeKalb Police Department in an honorable manner, and Officer Jeff Winters is to be recognized. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I could have Police Officer Ronaldo Hernandez and telecommunicator Elizabeth Basham. When I tell you this story, I want you to reflect on those who have children in the room, how you might have felt in the situation, or how you might have perceived it if you were the police officer on scene. During the evening hours of May 12, 2017, Officer Ronaldo Hernandez responded to a report of an unattended 2-year-old child, let me repeat that, 2-year-old child, partially clothed and walking in the roadway. The child was immediately taken into protective custody by the officer and brought to the police station. While waiting for DCFS to arrive, the Department of Children and Family Services, which exceeded 3 hours, this officer, and in support of this officer, telecommunicator Basham, supervised the child to include TC Basham providing the child with personally owned items from her own children to give the child a fresh diaper and some toys to play with to help occupy the child's time. Her assistant and the efforts of Officer Ronaldo Hernandez allowed officers to search for the child's home and the identification of a parent. The child had been left unattended, ended up on a roadway and alone, all of which could have had a tragic outcome beyond comprehension. Officer Hernandez and telecommunicator Basham's actions represented themselves and the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner. We're proud of their service, and I can only imagine how that child felt, if that child's still cognizant at 2 years old. But that fragment of time you gave that child, and maybe more importantly, that family, hopefully it left a big impression. You're to be honorably recognized and thanked. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to step into the commendations now, and may I have telecommunicators Brittany Hedden and Jennifer Barnett. The focus of these commendations are regarding a suicidal subject. On September 16, 2016, a traffic stop was conducted by officers which resulted in an arrest, with the offender being taken into custody and held in the city jail for processing. While officers were dealing with other matters in relation to this arrest, these telecommunicators, Brittany Hedden and Jennifer Barnett, saw the offender remove his shirt and place it around his neck in an effort to commit suicide. The TCs had observed this behavior via the security cameras within the police station. They took immediate action and notified the officers. The officers responded and prevented the subject from further harming himself. Had they not been there, had those officers been occupied just long enough, that could have been a loss of a life in the city jail. For their efforts, these TCs used their training, experience, and concern for this individual to prevent a life-threatening situation from occurring. Their actions represented themselves and the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner. They are to be honored, thanked, and commended. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know if it's good to wear these glasses or not, but we'll keep trying. Could we have police officers Allison Remness, Charles Verdoni, Joseph Gordon, and Danielle Sorensen please come forward? This incident also deals with another suicidal subject. And while we're on this topic, our police department dealt with over 200 suicidal subjects last year. As a result of that, and the result of the failure of the mental health system to adequately provide for people in crisis, our police department has engaged with the Mental Health Board in seeking a Department of Justice grant to specifically address the needs of law enforcement and the mentally ill or behaviorally challenged folks in our community. But on this occasion, on March 19, 2017, officers were dispatched to a suicidal subject armed with a knife in the 1200 block of Rushmore Drive. Officers arrived on scene and located a female inside the residence holding a knife to her own throat. Officers spoke with the individual for a lengthy period of time in an effort to de-escalate the situation. They eventually convinced the female to drop the knife. She was taken into custody and transported to the local hospital where she received treatment. Officers would later receive a letter from the family of the suicidal subject, thanking them for their actions, which ultimately prevented their family member from harming herself. The officers executed their training, experience, and concern for this person in a life-threatening situation and turned it into a positive situation with a positive life-changing outcome. Their actions represent themselves and the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner. They are to be honored, thanked, and commended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
May we have Officer Joseph Gordon and Detective Sadie Prestavi, please? The next commendation deals with a residential burglary. On August 7, 2016, Officer Joseph Gordon responded to a residential burglary in the 700 block of West Hillcrest Drive. During his investigation, he processed the crime scene, recovered latent fingerprints from the offender, and subsequently submitted them to the State Police Crime Lab for analysis. An automated fingerprint identification system identified the recovered fingerprints as belonging to a Demetrius Anderson. With the help and assistance of Detective Sadie Prestavi, the ensuing investigation determined that this offender had committed 7 other residential burglaries. Officer Gordon and Detective Prestavi have demonstrated exemplary investigative skills and dedication to duty, which led to the identification and arrest of a serial burglar. They have truly represented themselves in the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner, are to be honored, thanked, and commended. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have police officers Abedin O'Lanaran, Chris Mecca, Allison Remness, Ronaldo Hernandez, Stephen Parsons, Jonathan Bell, and Detective Keith Erkey. This citation also deals with another residential burglary. On July 29, 2017, officers responded to a residential burglary in the 900 block of West Hillcrest Drive. The investigation was a team effort, which included processing the crime scene, coordinating information regarding the suspect, and a variety of other duties. A photograph of the suspect was dispersed to officers when one of the officers recognized the subject from a contact just moments before. A foot patrol in the area located 4 suspects, one of which fled on foot as the officers approached, but was later apprehended. The suspects were in possession of items reported as stolen and would later confess to their involvement in the burglary. A search of an apartment linked to the suspects also led to the recovery of stolen property. This all occurred within an hour of the burglary being reported, the offenders being then located, arrested, and property recovered. All involved demonstrated their investigative skills, dedication to duty, and teamwork. They have represented themselves in the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner, are to be thanked, honored, and commended. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
If we could have members of the Targeted Response Unit come out. Police officers Chris Mecca, Jason Goodwin, Stephen Parsons, Detective Sonny Street, and Sergeant Jeffrey Weiss. This is a unit commendation, so this isn't for any specific individual. It's for the efforts of these officers in regard to their duties in the Targeted Response Unit. I have to tell you what the Targeted Response Unit is. It was a group formed in 2013 that was designed to address specific crimes, violent crimes, gang crimes, and narcotics. We had a focus on narcotics and weapons. They've done tremendous work over the years, and this summarizes some of their work so far in 2017. The Targeted Response Unit has implemented numerous proactive policing strategies to take guns and drugs off of our streets in the city of DeKalb and arrest those involved in their use. True, their very appropriate nickname, or acronym, conducted over 40 undercover drug operations, executed 18 search warrants, and participated in a variety of operations arresting known offenders in our community. As a result of their efforts, numerous weapons and significant amounts of cannabis, MDMA, LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, cocaine, crack cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and a variety of unauthorized prescription medications were recovered and numerous arrests made. That being, their efforts led to over 150 arrests, thousands of dollars, and 3 vehicles seized. This unit has demonstrated teamwork, creativity, dedication to duty. They have certainly represented themselves in the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner, are to be thanked, honored, and commended. And let me add this. The job that they have is extremely difficult. They encounter the worst of the worst, not unlike our other officers, but they intend to go out and find them. For their efforts, I say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just as a note of additional information as they're going through the handshake there, all officers continue to do a great job despite the challenges. These gentlemen have the luxury of going after the hardcore offenders, gun-wielding offenders. The other officers have to deal with it in between all of their service demands, but have the same zeal and drive for the job. If we could have Police Officer Parsons, why don't you come back up here again? This commendation involves unlawful possession of a weapon by felon. And this is where I have to be really honest with you as a police leader and having been involved in law enforcement for almost 4 decades. As much as I think this is an outstanding arrest and commendation is well deserved, there are times I fear for the lives of the men and women on this police department. And it certainly is never a police chief's goal to see anyone hurt or die in the line of duty. However, in this situation, either one could have happened to this young officer. On December 15, 2016, Officer Stephen Parsons was in the 800 block of Edgebrook Drive searching for a domestic battery suspect. At that time, he approached the subject in an attempt to identify or rule him out as the suspect or offender. The subject engaged the officer in limited conversation, began to walk away, and entered an apartment complex, refusing to comply. Once inside the building, the offender ran. Officer Parsons pursued on foot. He ordered him to stop, and ultimately had to begin to physically detain the offender who was trying to get into an apartment and escape the police. A struggle ensued, and the offender retrieved a handgun from his waistband. Now, you gotta put yourself in this position of this officer. In a hallway, one-on-one with an offender, there's two guns in that scenario, one that the offender has and one that the officer has. It's not a good mix. A struggle ensued, and the offender retrieved the handgun from his waistband. The offender, a convicted felon, was eventually taken into custody and a loaded handgun was recovered. The offender was charged with weapons-related offenses and resisting a peace officer. This dangerous street encounter resulted in the arrest of an armed felon and took a handgun off the street. Officer Parsons represented himself in the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner, is to be honored, thanked, and commended. And this is one of those cases that every officer on this police department faces. In this situation, Officer Parsons prevailed, and thank God for that. I'd like to say thank you. If we could have telecommunicators Adrian Oziah, Chris McMean, Elizabeth Basham, police officers Brian Ballo, Brian Soderstrom, Joshua Bolt, Jonathan Jerzyk, Keontae Mallet, Elizabeth Fabro, Allison Remness, Aaron Kleinmeyer, Chris Mecca, Sonny Street, Jason Goodwin, Jeff Ackland, Detective Michael Stewart, Sergeants Mark Tehan, Jeffrey Weiss, and Scott Farrell. And again, although I read off every name, the entire group mentioned are not all present for other reasons. But this citation involves an armed robbery. On December 20th, 2016, officers responded to an armed robbery in the 100 block of South 7th Street. The victim had been robbed at gunpoint and was able to provide officers with information that led to identifying the offenders. Officers responded to a location believed to be occupied by the suspects. They established a perimeter and made contact with a resident. As a party from inside, a parent opened the door to speak with the officers. Two suspects attempted to flee out the back door, but were apprehended by the officers in that area, along with a third suspect from inside the residence. Proceeds from the robbery, a firearm with defaced serial number, and other items of evidence were recovered. 3 juvenile offenders were charged with aggravated robbery, mob action, and other weapons-related offenses. Throughout this incident, all personnel involved demonstrated teamwork, professionalism. They had their skills on full display and dedication to duty. They represented themselves, the police department, and the police department in an exemplary manner and are to be honored, thanked, and commended. Thank you very much.
That's all right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great job. Thank you.
If we could have the following officers out. Police officers Michael Cicchetti, Ryan Wilkins, Jonathan Jerzyk, Abedin Olanaran, Joshua Bolt, Brian Ballo, Jason Goodwin, Sonny Street, Sergeants Jeffrey Weiss, and Thomas Pettit. This is another encounter with an armed offender. On January 17, 2017, officers responded to the 800 block of Russell Road regarding an armed gunman holding a female victim and her children against their will. The caller indicated the offender was armed with a handgun and had threatened to kill them if anyone came to the apartment. Responding officers began to establish a perimeter. As the offender was exiting the back door, he was apprehended. and a handgun was recovered. The investigation determined the incident was a domestic battery, and the offender, Kenneth Rhodes, was charged with several offenses, including domestic battery and unlawful use of weapons. The officers demonstrated effective teamwork and dedication to duty and their training to implement a sound resolution to this event. That being the arrest of an armed subject and the recovery of a handgun. They represented themselves and the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner. They are to be honored, thanked, and commended for their actions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Congratulations. Thank you again. Congratulations.
Officer Jeff Winters, please come forward. As the other officers are clearing the room, this is another encounter with an armed offender. You know, sometimes people think that calls of this nature are only limited to big urban centers. Last year, we recovered almost 80 firearms from our streets. Over the last little over 30 days, we took into evidence 9 weapons, including one stolen out of the city of Chicago. This involves a domestic disturbance and an armed offender. On May 3rd, 2017, officers responded to the 800 block of Kimberly Drive regarding an offender displaying a handgun during a domestic disturbance. Officer Jeffrey Winters arrived on scene. The suspect fled on foot, and Officer Winters initiated a foot pursuit. Officer Winters, during that foot pursuit, provided a description of the suspect, direction he was heading, all of which resulted in the offender being apprehended with the assistance of other officers. At the time of his apprehension, a loaded handgun was recovered from the offender, a convicted felon who was taken into custody and charged with several weapons-related offenses. Officer Winters' actions during an encounter of this nature with an armed felon represented himself and the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner. He is to be honored, thanked, and commended. Thank you, Jeff. We only have a couple of awards left to put out tonight, and these are going to be life-saving awards. But what I want to say before I go into these awards, because these are pretty highly decorated awards, and their purpose is to honor someone's life being saved. But before I go down that road, I want to remind everyone once again that this is only a sampling of the good work the men and women at the DeKalb Police Department do, and they do day in and day out. I think you'll hear a theme today as we go on to honor September 11th and those who have died or been seriously injured as a result of terrorist attacks 16 years ago. The common theme will be every time these officers went out onto the street, responded to one of these calls, those that were either honored here tonight or those who weren't honored tonight but still do that job day in and day out, they had no idea what call was coming across that radio. They had no idea what was on the end of that call. They had no idea if an offender was armed or not, and they had absolutely no idea of what the outcome would be. But as a result of so many things, the outcomes we have tonight are good. The first life-saving award, and the recipient's not present, but I wanted to read the citation to you. This recipient is the highest decorated police officer in the city of DeKalb. He's also a Medal of Honor recipient, Sergeant Thomas Pettit. What's kind of the background on this is Sergeant Pettit is also the primary instructor for us for CPR and first aid. This is a life-saving award. On March 23rd, 2017, officers responded to an unresponsive female at a residence in the 2200 block of Cambridge Drive. Sergeant Thomas Pettit recognized this was a life-threatening situation and was the first to arrive on scene. He observed that the victim was not breathing and began to administer rescue breathing that lasted for several minutes. DeKalb Fire paramedics arrived and took over. They administered Narcan, which revived the victim, and transported her to the hospital. The following week, the victim had fully recovered, was back in high school participating in sports. Sergeant Pettit demonstrated his life-saving skills, his concern for another human being, and dedication to duty as he helped to save a victim. He represented himself in the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner. He should be acknowledged, honored, commended for this life-saving action, and we will present him with this award at another time. But I wanted to say thanks to him. Thank you, Sergeant Pettit. In these last two awards, you're also going to hear a common theme. First and foremost is DeKalb Police and Fire work together very well. Second to none, I would say, based on my experience. And it's a privilege to serve with them. And oftentimes the firefighters are taking some of their life-saving measures for granted because that's their job and that's what they do day in and day out. When police officers do it, it's a little bit more of a rare occasion, to say the least. Can we have Police Officer Brian Ballo, please? On December 29, 2016, Officer Brian Ballo responded to the 300 block of Augusta Avenue regarding an intoxicated male that had fallen. Upon arriving on scene, Officer Ballo observed the male on the floor, unresponsive, with another person administering chest compressions in an effort to provide some type of rescue service to the victim. Officer Ballo assessed the victim, determined he had no respirations and only a faint pulse. His assessment included going through the use of a defibrillator, an AED protocol, and subsequently began CPR, during which the patient, as a result of the rescue breathing and CPR, began to breathe on his own. DeKalb Fire paramedics arrived on scene, administered Narcan, and transported the victim to the hospital. Officer Ballo demonstrated his life-saving skills, exemplified his training, and his dedication to duty to help save a fellow human being. He represents himself in the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner, deserves to be thanked, honored, and commended, and shall receive a life-saving award for his actions. Thank you, Brian. It helps if you can see.
Gene, you want my cheaters?
I got mine over on the podium. They're still not down there.
Brian, thank you very much.
Let's go out. Let's give him another round. As Brian's walking out, we have one more recipient. We'll ask her to come out, Police Officer Elizabeth Fabro. Now, I just want to say a few words about these life-saving awards and the other common denominator. The scourge of heroin and opioids in general are killing our young people. Back when I was a young police officer and as a young soldier, when someone was using heroin, they were on their last legs. They looked like they belonged in an alley. They looked emaciated, and everyone knew they had been down a rough road to get to that point. Today, it's not the same. Today, our kids, our high school children, our middle school children are having overdose issues. If street heroin can be purchased for less than a package of cigarettes, it can take the lives of countless people that never had to walk down the same road that heroin addicts did in days gone by. It's a scourge. It's a scourge that we're working with others to help eliminate in our community, but it's a scourge we all need to deal with. But let's focus back on this life-saving award and Police Officer Elizabeth Fabro. On January 10th, 2017, Officer Elizabeth Fabro responded to an apartment in the 1400 block of West Lincoln Highway regarding a male subject that had collapsed. He was unresponsive and not breathing. Upon arriving on scene, Officer Fabro recognized the need for a medical bag and brought it into the apartment. She located the victim, assessed him, and determined he was unresponsive. She set up her AED and used her training and administered the AED, her defibrillator. DeKalb fire paramedics arrived and took over. Officer Fabro remained and assisted paramedics as needed. Due to her quick and skilled response, the subject was revived and transported to the hospital for further medical care. Officer Fabro demonstrated her life-saving skills, her effective training, and a dedication to duty and a concern for a fellow human being as she performed her duties that day to save this individual's life. She has represented herself and the DeKalb Police Department in an exemplary manner. We should honor, thank, and commend you as you receive this life-saving award. Thank you, Liz. Mayor, city staff, community, I know this was a ceremony that came out in bolts of lightning at you, and I hope that one of the takeaways you have from this event is not only that your police officers and your support staff, your telecommunicators, face unprecedented challenges every day, but they do it on behalf of you. They do a job that many people would not do. How many people in this life would put a badge on, put a uniform on, wear a gun, and go into the unknown? And do so day in and day out with just unyielding courage. For the job they've done, I want to say thank you. It's certainly a tremendous honor to serve with them. And in my going into 39 years of service, I would say this: we're blessed here. There are no finer men and women on this job than the men and women of the DeKalb Police Department. Thank you for this opportunity.
Chief Lowry, on behalf of the citizens of the city of DeKalb and this city council, and all of those who admire the heroic efforts and the award-winning efforts of our police officers and our first responders and our firemen, I thank you for this great presentation this evening. Unless there are other comments, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole.
Mr. Mayor, public comments?
Yes. Would anyone in the audience like to speak to the award ceremony tonight? If not, we have a motion on the floor to adjourn
Second.
and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? We are adjourned. We will resume with our regular city council meeting promptly at 6 p.m. Thank you.